Chapter 5. Throughout the little camp, the hunters heard the whimpering sound too. "A wolf! A wolf!" shouted one. They reached for their spears, grabbing flaming torches from the fire, and rushed out into the darkness to search the brushes and scrub wood. Volt heard the noise. Throwing his deerskin robe across his shoulders, he strode out into the firelight. "What is it?" "Wolf!" the hunter repeated. "Kill the evil beast! Ugh! I'm Volt. I'm a tough guy," he shouted. "This will curse our camp if we don't." And he followed the hunters, shaking his spear. Tail stood at the edge of the camp, listening to the men move through the forest. He heard them beating the bushes with their spears, and he saw their torches bobbing in and out of the darkness. He tried to think of a way to save the little wolf, to raise his voice or to call out would only bring the hunters running. Somehow, he had to find Ram before they did. He grabbed a flaming stick from the fire and limped out into the night. He heard the hunters crashing through the underbrush, and he knew they were forming a wide circle, getting ready to close in and surround the wolf dog. Tail held his torch high, trying to see through the dark branches of the buckthorn trees. "Ram!" he whispered, his eyes searching the dim light. "Where are you, Ram?" Moments passed, and the little animal had been frightened off by the noise, but Tail was sure he must be near, and he called again softly, "Ram!" Nothing moved. His torch flickered, and the waving shadows of the buckthorn trees played tricks on his eyes. His heart sank as he heard the hunters come closer. The ring of spears was tightening. Just then, a gray shadow moved across his path, slinking out of the darkness. Tail waited as the animal crept towards him, whimpering. It was Ram! Tail leaned down and pushed him back. "Go! Get away quickly!" Ram refused to move. He stood there looking up at Tail, a fearful look in his yellow eyes. Tail picked up a stick as if to throw. "Go!" he ordered sharply. But it was too late. Tail heard the voices of the hunters only a few paces away, and the little wolf was nearly surrounded. Quickly, Tail sprang forward. He thrust his torch into the damp earth, quenching the flames, and then he threw it aside. He curled his leg of his bad foot around the shaft of his spear and vaulted out ahead. "Woof, woof!" he shouted loud enough for the hunters to hear. "Come!" he whispered fiercely to the wolf dog. Stumbling, lurching through the forest, Tail heard their pounding feet as the hunters picked up the trail, and without looking back, Tail hurled over the ground, dodging between the trees and the bushes, and the wolf dog followed close behind, and Tail ran off into the night. Branches whipped across his face. Tree roots caught his feet, holding him back. But if he could run fast enough and long enough, he knew he could outrun the hunters and save Ram. Breathing hard, he pushed his way through the underbrush, listening to the grunts and shouts of the angry men as they came after him. He ran faster and faster, twisting and turning through the trees and the brush, trying to throw them off track. But they just kept keeping pace with him, crashing through the forest not far behind him. He stumbled on blindly through the blackness, vaulting along on the shaft of his spear. His arms grew heavy. His legs felt like stones. The trees, the shadows, the night itself became a tangled wall. holding him back as he plunged into the darkness. How long he ran, Teo did not know, but little by little the shouts and footsteps began to fade, and he continued on until he was sure he was safe. Panting and out of breath, he had almost reached the river. He stopped and looked around, and the wolf dog was not behind him. "Ram!" he whispered, searching the darkness. "Where are you?" He waited and listened, and nothing moved. He had wondered if Ram had been caught. Maybe the wolf dog had been killed by the hunters, and the hunters had turned back. But he hadn't heard anything. Silence and darkness added to his gloom. His head throbbed. He turned to go back, and then once again he saw old Rambud slinking out of the shadows, whimpering and creeping up to him on his belly. With a wave of relief, Teo stooped down and threw his arms around the animal's shoulders. He spoke to him firmly. "You can't come into camp with the clan people. They got no love. They got no love for the wolves. They're going to want to kill you." Teo pushed the little animal away. Go back and wait in the slough." Ram looked up, panting, his tongue lolling out of the side of his mouth. Teo reached down to pick up a stone. Immediately the wolf dog turned. He looked back once or twice and then disappeared into the darkness. And then Teo grinned. At last he found a way for the wolf dog to understand. Teo walked lightly as he returned to camp, but he put on an angry face. "I couldn't catch him," he said to the hunters as they gathered by the fire. "But he is far gone. He will not return." Volt grunted, slamming his fist into the palm of his hand. "It's an evil sign, I tell you," rubbing his scarred cheek with the back of his hand, his dark shaggy head nodding. "It's definitely an evil sign. Like, I'm pretty sure wolves are evil, and so that's a sign of evil, because it's an evil sign, because it's a wolf, so it must be evil. We must watch for him and kill him," said Garth. Sometimes Garth sounded more like Volt than Volt did. "We will not let him get away." And Teo felt his stomach churn. The next morning, after he had banked the fires with 3 of the boys from the clan, Teo walked out over on the foot of the limestone cliffs, far away from camp. As the ash-gray walls loomed high over his head, and he came to a spot with many caves. "This is a good place," he thought. "Here I can make my images away from the eyes of Volt and the hunters. Yet it's close enough to visit Kala and bring back food to her and the clan people." He looked up at the steep rocky ledges and started to climb. It ain't easy, but he was able to cling to the crevasses and stunted piney shrubs growing out of the cliff wall. The first 2 caves he saw were not to his liking. One was too small, and the walls were rough and uneven. The second had a stinky animal smell. Ew! Teo did not wish to share his home with a leopard or a bear. No thanks. But about halfway up, he found a third one, and it looked out over the flat valley. He saw no pug marks, and he was sure it was deserted. It was about 10 spear lengths long and opened into a small cavern, and the walls were smooth with only a few breaks or cracks. This is what I've been looking for, he thought. This will be a great place to stay. Certain that he had found what he wanted, Tail spent 4 days filling his caves with dried grass, and firewood and kindling. Kala gave him a bearskin robe and a tallow lamp made from a large cockle shell filled with animal fat, and a wick made of peat moss. She showed him how to dry cattail roots and burr reed tubers for cooking. She wrapped live embers in a handful of wet grass, placing them in a hollow bone, and gave them to him for his fire. When his cave was ready, Tail went down to the little stream that ran through the willow wood and found a bank of yellow clay. And he scooped it out. This clammy substance, he rolled it into a long piece and let it dry in the sun. And he picked oak twigs and burned them in the fire to make sticks of charcoal. This done, he stepped back and looked around at his little cave. With his chunks of clay and his charcoal and a handful of moss for a wiper, he was ready to become a maker of images. He had no pictures or sketch to work from. He'd have to draw from memory. He picked up a stick of dried clay. It felt good in his hands. And he made a mark on the gray wall. And it showed up bold and sharp. I will draw a horse, he thought. Even though no one else will see it, I know what I've done, and it'll feel good. He started with the head, drawing the long face and the square jaw. Next, he sketched the ears and a gentle curve of the neck. He worked quickly, trying to see in his mind's eye how the horses looked when he saw them out in the valley. With firm strokes of chalk, he drew the muscular body, the shoulders, the arched rump, and the tail. Then he tried drawing the legs, and his hand hesitated. Did the front legs bend just below the body or further down? He just could not remember. The hind legs were even more difficult. He thought they were slanted towards the tail and then bent forward at the knee, but where was the knee? He wasn't sure. He went on, his hand moving across the wall. When he had finished, he stepped back. It's not right, he thought. The legs are all wrong.